History is filled with moments so disturbing they've been deliberately forgotten. These are not myths, not legends. These are 10 real events from the past, dark and unsettling. Welcome to Darklight Archives. This is history at its most morbid. Viewer discretion is advised. In the Dutch Republic's golden age of science, one anatomist pushed the boundaries of death and display to extraordinary and deeply disturbing limits. His name was Frederik Ruysch, a pioneering physician and botanist in Amsterdam, known for developing groundbreaking embalming fluids, but he is most remembered for his bizarre and macabre anatomical displays, including one made from the preserved body of his own infant daughter. Ruysch developed a secret solution that kept human tissue soft and lifelike, decades before formaldehyde was discovered. He created elaborate anatomical tableaus, artistic arrangements of preserved infants, dissected organs, and fetal skeletons posed in dramatic, almost theatrical scenes. In one case, he dressed a fetal skeleton in lace and placed it weeping beside a jar of its own arteries. His most controversial exhibit involved the body of his own daughter, who died as a baby. Rather than bury her, Ruysch embalmed and preserved her entire body, posing it among his public displays. He kept her in a cabinet in his home laboratory and would speak to her regularly, treating her as both subject and memorial. By the late 1600s, Ruysch's collection drew thousands of visitors, including Peter the Great of Russia, who was so impressed that he purchased the entire collection in 1717. It was shipped to St. Petersburg and became part of Russia's first anatomical museum. Many pieces still exist today. Though respected as a scientist, Ruysch blurred the line between mourning and exhibition, turning death into both art and obsession. For nearly 300 years, the Ottoman Empire implemented a chilling form of human taxation, known as the Devshirme, or blood tax. It was used to extract young Christian boys from their families across the Balkans. The boys, aged between 8 and 18, were seized by force every 3 to 5 years. Often, entire villages lined up children while Ottoman officials inspected teeth, posture and intelligence. Those selected were taken hundreds of miles away to Istanbul, forcibly converted to Islam and forbidden from ever seeing their families again. Some became janissaries, trained in brutal military academies where beatings, starvation and solitary confinement were routine. Others became palace officials, bureaucrats or bodyguards. They were not permitted to speak their native languages and were often renamed, reclothed and ritually circumcised upon arrival. Some were even castrated. While a small number, such as Sokolu Mehmed Pasha, rose to become viziers or admirals, most were broken by the system. Families that resisted the Devshirme were punished by heavy taxation, exile or death. The practice only ended in the 17th century under increasing pressure from European powers and Christian uprisings. In 1665, the Great Plague of London reached the tiny Derbyshire village of Eyam, but the villagers made a decision that would turn them into heroes of self-sacrifice. The plague arrived in a bundle of cloth sent from London to a local tailor. Within a week, the tailor's assistant was dead. As death spread, the village rector, William Mompesson, and former Puritan minister Thomas Stanley proposed a drastic solution: voluntary quarantine. The people of Eyam agreed to cut themselves off from the outside world. A stone boundary was established. No one could leave and no outsider could enter. Supplies were left at designated rocks and troughs on the edge of the village. In exchange, villagers left coins soaked in vinegar to disinfect them. What followed was unimaginable. Entire families were wiped out. Bodies were buried in garden plots. One woman, Elizabeth Hancock, buried 6 children and her husband alone over just 8 days. Out of 350 residents, over 260 died. However, this number is disputed, but the decision likely prevented the plague from spreading to the city of Sheffield, just 13 miles away. Most people associate the guillotine with the French Revolution, 1793, Robespierre and the Reign of Terror. But honestly, few realise that France continued using the guillotine as its official method of execution well into the modern era. In fact, the final beheading occurred just 5 years before the first Star Wars film. On September 10th, 1977, Hamida Jandoubi, a 27-year-old Tunisian immigrant, was executed by guillotine in Marseille. Convicted of torturing and murdering his former girlfriend, Jandoubi's case was especially brutal. But what really shocked the world was the method of his death. He was led to the scaffold at 4:40 a.m. and his head was removed in seconds. His was the last execution in Western Europe, carried out with a machine most had assumed was long retired. During the 20th century, France guillotined many people, including Eugène Weidmann in 1939, whose public execution was witnessed by hundreds and even photographed, leading to a law banning public executions thereafter. From that point forward, all beheadings were conducted in prison courtyards before dawn, shielded from public view. Although France officially abolished the death penalty in 1981, the guillotine remained technically legal until then. Its persistence reflected France's deeply conflicted relationship with justice, tradition, and spectacle, a contradiction made chilling by its recency. In the remote mountain caves of Kabayan, the Ibaloi people of the Philippines practiced a mortuary ritual so elaborate it preserved corpses for centuries, turning them into what are now called the fire mummies. The process began shortly before death. The dying were placed on a salt-restricted diet to prevent fluid retention, and then given bitter herbs to reduce bacterial activity. After death, the body was seated upright on a bamboo platform suspended above an open fire. Tobacco smoke was blown directly into the mouth using hollow pipes to dehydrate internal organs. The drying process took several days. The body was then washed in herbal oils and wrapped in tree bark or hand-woven blankets. The mummies were sealed inside stone cave tombs. Due to the high altitude, cold air and ritual precision, the skin, hair and tattoos of many are still visible 700 years later. Sadly, grave robbing in the 20th century led to dozens being stolen and sold on the black market. Several were recovered in international sting operations and returned to the Ibaloi community for reburial. Carl Tanzler, a radiologist at a U.S. Marine hospital in Key West, Florida, became infatuated with a young Cuban-American tuberculosis patient named Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyos. She died in 1931 at just 21 years old. But Tanzler, claiming visions and prophetic dreams, was convinced she was destined to be his bride, even in death. 2 years after her burial, he broke into her above-ground mausoleum, stole her body, and brought it to his home. Over the next 7 years, he reconstructed her decomposing corpse using piano wire, glass eyes, silk stockings, and waxed gauze. He filled her abdominal cavity with rags, regularly applied perfumes to cover the smell, and dressed her in a wedding gown. Neighbours grew suspicious due to Tanzler's odd behaviour and rumours that he spoke to a life-sized doll. In 1940, Maria's family demanded an investigation. Police raided Tanzler's home and found Maria's mummified corpse lying in his bed. Despite the grotesque nature of the crime, Tanzler was never charged. The statute of limitations had expired. Elena's body was publicly displayed at a local funeral home where over 6,800 people came to view it before she was reburied in an unmarked grave. High in India's Himalayas, more than 16,000 feet above sea level, lies Rupkund Lake, ominously known as Skeleton Lake. In 1942, a forest ranger named Hari Kishan Madwal, patrolling the Nanda Devi National Park, stumbled upon hundreds of human skeletons emerging from melting snow and ice around the lake's edge. Local legends told of a 9th century king, Raja Jastaval of Kanauj, who journeyed to the sacred Nanda Devi shrine with his pregnant wife Rani Balampa, accompanied by servants and dancers. The story goes that their party was struck by a sudden storm of massive hailstones, killing them all near Rupkund. For decades, scientists speculated whether the remains belonged to a single tragic event. However, recent research has completely transformed what we know. A 2019 genome-wide study analysing 38 individuals found 3 distinct genetic groups and evidence of 2 separate mass death events. One group of 23 individuals, dated to around 800 CE, had South Asian ancestry, matching the timing of the legend. A second group of 14 individuals, remarkably, had DNA typical of modern populations in mainland Greece and Crete, dated to the early 1800s CE. A third individual with Southeast Asian ancestry also dated to around the same later period. This means Rupkund Lake saw 2 waves of mass fatalities over 1,000 years apart, each involving very different populations converging on this remote location. The exact reasons both groups died remain unclear, but many skulls show signs of blunt force trauma consistent with lethal hailstones, lending credence to the ancient tale of the deadly storm. The combination of legends, genetic evidence, and radiocarbon dating has made Rupkund one of the world's most fascinating and mysterious mass grave sites, a place where the mountains keep secrets that span a millennium. For over 2,000 years, rulers across South and Southeast Asia used elephants as executioners, creating one of the most spectacular and terrifying methods of capital punishment in recorded history, known as Gunga Rao in India. Execution by elephant was both an instrument of death and a theatrical symbol of royal authority. Historical records from the Mughal Empire describe emperors like Akbar the Great personally ordering executions by elephant, with precise instructions to prolong or hasten the victim's death. Some elephants were trained to drag condemned prisoners through streets, publicly humiliating them before crushing them underfoot. Others wore specially fitted iron blades on their tusks, designed to tear victims limb from limb. European travellers documented how elephants could be commanded to crush a person instantly or to torture them slowly by breaking bones one by one. François Bernier, a 17th century French physician and traveller, witnessed such executions during his time at the Mughal court and wrote extensively about the precision with which elephants followed their mahout's commands. In Siam, which is modern-day Thailand, royal elephants were trained not only to trample, but to hurl convicts into the air before stomping them to death. These executions took place in palace courtyards or public squares where thousands gathered to watch. British colonial administrators noted executions by elephant continued in some princely states until the mid-1800s, despite efforts to ban them. Some of the last documented cases occurred in Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, where criminals accused of treason or violent crimes were publicly executed by elephants under royal decree. This method's longevity was due to its powerful symbolism. The elephant represented both imperial power and divine retribution, making each execution a terrifying reminder of the ruler's absolute authority. For over 400 years, Europe's standard treatment for syphilis, one of the most feared sexually transmitted infections in history, was mercury, a metal now known to be highly toxic. Physicians prescribe mercury ointments, pills, or fumigation treatments, under the saying, "A night with Venus, a lifetime with Mercury." Patients were made to sit in wooden boxes called sweating chambers, where hot coals vaporized mercury, which they inhaled through the nose and mouth. Doctors believed mercury caused the body to sweat out venereal poison. But instead, it led to mercury poisoning, horrific side effects included excessive salivation, tooth loss, tremors, kidney failure, and neurological collapse. Some patients died directly from the treatment, not the disease. Mercury therapy began shortly after syphilis swept Europe in the late 1400s, with the earliest known prescriptions recorded in 1496 by Italian surgeon Giovanni de Vigo. The practice spread rapidly and became so accepted that entire hospital wards, such as those at London's Lock Hospital, specialised in mercury-based cures. By the 18th century, it was common for patients to suffer worse health from the treatment than the infection itself. A few contemporary physicians raised alarms, but mercury remained the dominant remedy until the discovery of salvarsan, also known as arsphenamine, in 1909, and later penicillin. Mercury's long, deadly role in syphilis treatment shows how misguided medical orthodoxy can cause widespread, generations-long harm. In the heart of occupied Manchuria, during the Second Sino-Japanese War, Japan's Unit 731 became one of the most infamous sites of war crimes in modern history. Originally created by the Japanese military police, it was soon taken over by General Shiro Ishii, a combat medic officer who commanded the facility until Japan's surrender in 1945. Unit 731 was established in 1935 to replace the destroyed Jongma Fortress, an earlier prison laboratory complex. At its peak, the Harbin area base covered over 6 square kilometres and included prison cells, laboratories, crematoria, and even a dedicated power plant. The facility's primary mission was to develop biological and chemical weapons through lethal human experimentation. Between 1936 and 1945, it is estimated that approximately 14,000 prisoners were killed directly inside Unit 731. Victims included Chinese civilians, Korean forced labourers, Soviet prisoners of war, and others. Beyond direct killings, historians estimate over 200,000 people ultimately died from plague, cholera, and other infectious diseases deliberately spread by Unit 731 and its affiliated sites across China and Southeast Asia. One of the most disturbing experiments involved frostbite testing conducted by Army engineer Hisato Yoshimura. Captives were forced outdoors in sub-zero temperatures, where their limbs were repeatedly dipped into water of varying coldness and then exposed to freezing winds. Once frostbite set in, limbs were struck with sticks or bent until the skin audibly cracked, all performed without anesthesia, to observe how flesh and bone responded to freezing injuries. At the war's end, fearing Soviet capture of data, Japanese officials destroyed the site. But General Ishii and other leaders of Unit 731 escaped justice when the United States granted them immunity in exchange for their research findings on biological warfare, information that remained classified for decades. These aren't ghost stories or legends. They're real, verifiable pieces of history. Grim reminders that cruelty and suffering often hide in plain sight. The past is darker than we remember, and it demands to be known